This is great. Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on your coast. My name is Carrie Scott. I lead marketing at Spruce Health, and I'm so excited to have you all with us today. Even more excited to be welcoming Herd back for their annual financial trends report. We're going to be talking about private practice therapists in 2025 and what y'all are facing by way of financial trends. And I love getting into this. We have so many folks registered for this event, which is always a terrific sign because it means you're just as excited about the content as I am. With that, let's get into some of the logistics. First off, none of you are on camera, so that's the good news. Just the three of us, and I'm going to turn mine off as soon as I get through just these two short slides. This is being recorded. So if you miss something or there's something you want to revisit or you have to drop off early, I will be sending you the link to the recording after we wrap, so don't worry. It will also live on our blog in the future if you ever want to find it later on and you've lost track of that email. Also, please ask your questions as we go. There's a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. That's a good place to put them. Justin is going to be fielding those questions on behalf of Herd for Forrest, and we may address them as we go if they're relevant to the slide or save them for the end. There will be time for that. That said, there will be, one more quick thing, there will be a couple of polls throughout. And when those polls pop up, we encourage you to use the chat function. That will keep your answers separate from your questions, if that makes sense. So please be engaged as you like. We love interactivity. We really hope that you get as much out of this as you would like. And then just a real quick on what Spruce is for those of you who are new to us and joining for the first time. Justin, now we can just move forward to that next slide. So Spruce is medical communication software, simply put. It is a cloud-based solution that transforms your workflows and the way you work in your practice. It integrates business phone with text and faxing and telemedicine, enabling you and if you have a care team to collaborate and streamline your patient interactions and ultimately drive greater accountability across the board. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that. I think most of you are Spruce users and you know us well. But if you do want to learn more, I encourage you to check out sprucehealth.com after the webinar. And with that, I am going to let the Herd team introduce themselves. I'm going to dip back and please enjoy this webinar. There's so much great content here for you all. Thank you, Forrest and Justin, for joining us. I'm going to let you take it away.
Thank you, Carrie, for having us back. We're super excited and know this is a little bit more of a unique concept than what we've talked about in the past. So we're excited, though, because it is data that hopefully you can use to better run, manage, optimize your practice. We're going to be sprinkling accounting and tax tidbits throughout. But normally we go super deep on one topic, and today is a little different, right? High level, right? When we look at this year, what are therapists telling us? We'll get more into that shortly. My name's Forrest. I lead partnerships here at Herd. Actually just came up on my 4-year anniversary, was our first employee. So I've spoken to thousands of different therapists over the years in a lot of different capacities. And prior to working at Herd, I got all my fun world of accounting and tax knowledge. Spent almost 5 years at PricewaterhouseCoopers, one of the big 4 accounting firms. But I'm going to try to take that accounting hat off today because I know that's no fun and often gets too deep in the details. And like Carrie said, really encourage Q&A. We'll have 10 minutes at the end dedicated. And then Justin will be help monitoring it throughout, bringing up some questions for the broader group. The one thing I'll just put a little asterisk out there, there might be a question or two that Justin and I are unable to answer if it's based off facts and circumstances related to your personal situation, right? Puts both of us right in a little bit of a risk because we don't have all the information. So anyways, I'll hand it over to Justin and then we'll get moving.
Hello, everybody. My name is Justin Frederick. I've got quite a few years of experience in public accounting, tax, bookkeeping, that sort of thing. I work at Herd as a support professional here, and happy to join Forrest and serving you as far as your Q&A, getting a little bit more into a further understanding of how this works as far as your practice goes. But happy to kick it back to Forrest and we can start this off.
Fantastic. Awesome. So just like Carrie shared, just gonna give a quick overview at Herd for those who are unfamiliar. So overall, at a high level, financial management software built for therapists. What does that really mean, right? Starts with doing your bookkeeping. So Herd will take care of all of your categorizations each month, close out your books, and then provide profit and loss statements and other monthly reports. From there, we will move to quarterly taxes, state and federal, as well as your annual taxes. So really a one-stop shop because we do both personal and business. But at the end of the day, our goals are one, empowering and educating therapists. As we know, there's not a lot of great resources out there and likely didn't go to school to be a business owner. And then on top of that, right, saving you time and saving you money. Fantastic. So if you are interested in learning more about Herd, we offer free consultations. And so I'm unable to send this via the chat, but in case you don't like QR codes, I'll have Carrie or Justin share this out later, or when we open up the chat, I'll share it out. But a great thing about being a Spruce member is you save 15% on our annual plans. So that is over a $300 savings. So if you want to learn more, great way, no pressure. And also a great way for us to learn more about you and your practice and see if Herd may be a good fit. Awesome. So demographics, right? This is important to go into behind who we surveyed and where those people came from. So we had almost 1,000 more respondents this year. It was our third annual trend report. So really excited as we have a great grasp of data from folks at various different professions, levels of careers, and geographies. Okay. Perfect. So this shows the state footprint. We had respondents in every single state, which is exciting, including Washington, D.C. And as you can see, the respondents, right, were based off population usually. California, right, most populated state, number one, which also aligns from Herd's end. Most of our members are in California. Great. So why these next few slides are important is for you all to understand that when you see a data point around average profit or income or expenses, you also have to think about where you're at in your journey, right? If you are a brand new therapist who started their practice last month, there's no way you have the same profit or income as someone who's been doing it for years, right? Same thing as if you've been doing it for years, you might have optimized or outsourced or found new ways to cut down on expenses. So take this data, right, with a grain of salt, but it should hopefully be directional information to help make better decisions down the road. Licensure type, right? For the most part, psychologists having that PhD often have the highest session rate and therefore usually the highest income. But what's great, similar to experience, we have a nice array of licensure types. But no, right, if you deep dive specifically into a counselor, an LMFT, you might see a different income level for that specific profession or license type than a psychologist, for example. This one shocked me a little bit. I thought it would be a little bit higher, or even the hybrid of both being higher in terms of where folks see or how they see clients. But you'll see only 2% exclusively see in person, right? Which ever since COVID, we've seen this huge paradigm shift of folks moving into teletherapy or teletherapy only, which is great from an expense and business side. But I know over the last few months from conversations with other partners, we are starting to see folks wanting to go back in person, at least as a hybrid model, meaning that, hey, maybe 1 or 2 days a week, they're renting out a fractional space or going into an office, or even having folks come into some offhand home office. So it'll be interesting to see this next year when we run this survey. I would imagine that hybrid number will go up and potentially this exclusivity number will go up. Now, this, again, another interesting one that I necessarily wasn't thinking would be the results. Why this specific stat of 61% of therapists work with clients for less than 12 months is important is reminding yourselves that in addition to being a therapist, you're a business owner. And so seeing that number there, you have to plan for at the end of this year that a few of your clients may be leaving, whether it's they move states, no longer need therapy, maybe they can't afford it, a variety of different reasons. The other thing to remember is you're not alone. That doesn't mean you're doing necessarily a poor job by any means, right? This is what the data is saying. So the average therapist is seeing, again, 61% stay for less than 12 months. So the business impact of that, right, is one, always recommend having a wait list. So as soon as an individual leaves and you don't have that full caseload anymore, you have a list of folks to have outreach to. Maybe you've automated some of those email campaigns or have a way that you can get them integrated into your practice right away. Now, if you have a wait list, the other nice thing that would be doing is potential, or excuse me, if you don't have a wait list, then you want to think through a marketing strategy or marketing plan. So what that could entail is, hey, I know if I lose one or two of my clients or patients and no one is on my wait list, I should have a budgeted safety net of some funds for marketing. Facebook ads, maybe it's redoing your website, enhancing your Psychology Today ad, whatever it may be, right? But you want a contingency plan around this because it is a reality. And so then that way you don't sit there for a few months without a full caseload, as it's often necessary to hit those income or profit goals at the end of the year. Now, the best marketing is free marketing. And what you see here is referrals and word of mouth was the number one way therapists got new clients, right? And again, thinking about yourself as a business owner, every interaction along the way that you have could have a positive impact or potentially negative impact on your business. And so an example here may be Justin comes to me for a consultation. After meeting with Justin, I say, you know what, like, based off your needs and desires, I don't think myself as a therapist is going to be a great fit. And I could just say, good luck, Justin. Or I could say, here are 3 or 4 other individuals nearby your city or locality that may be a great fit for you. Treated Justin with A+ customer service, right? Justin leaves and says, hey, I get it. I'm not a fit. And then though, Justin is talking to Carrie the next week at a coffee shop and says, hey, Carrie, like if you ever need a therapist of XYZ type, you should go talk to Forrest, right? Unrealistic example that the 3 of us are going to be doing that. But if you get the concept of what I'm trying to say is that your brand matters and you never know who's talking about you or referring you out. And it pays big dividends, right? If you can rely on this and exclude marketing, which we have a slide on later, and you'll see people sometimes spend $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 a year on marketing. So if you could get that to under $100 and rely on this word of mouth, great for your profit and bottom line of your business. Okay, so Kara, we got our first poll. So if you don't mind turning that chat back on for a second. And this is a fun one, and we'll obviously tell you the answer in the next slide. For all those out there today, what percent of therapists made $100,000 or more in profit in 2024? And remember, profit is your income, money coming in, subtracted by your expenses, money going out would then be your profit. All right, Yasmina was our first respondent, so thank you. And remember, you'll use the chat for this webinar chat for this so that we can keep that Q&A nice and clean. Okay, so some 50%, 0%, and a lot of mid-20s, 60, that's new high, 10. Fantastic. Okay, that gives us a nice little realm. And so now we'll cut to the chase here. All right, go one more slide here, Justin. So if you look at over 100%, right, we've cut into different cohorts. So there was 14% of therapists in 2024 that made it. And April in the chat made a great point, right? It all depends on location, licensure, part-time, full-time, and experience level. absolutely right. And that's why I want to start to talk through some of those demographics at the beginning. Right. But you see a big breakdown here of all over the board. And also a high population under $25,000. That could mean they're just getting going. They might be part-time. They might be in the practice of cutting or in the situation of cutting down expenses. But one takeaway here from your business side is if you are someone making more than a profit $100,000 or expect to make more than $100,000 in profit this year, you should be thinking about what's called an S corporation. S corps is a whole nother webinar and concept on its own, but I'll just briefly touch on it. So an S corp is sorry, Justin, if you don't mind going back, is a tax designation. And first step would need to be doing is a savings assessment. Are you actually going to save money by being taxed as an S corp? The last thing you want to do is start your practice off and immediately become an S corp. Why? Because you could end up paying more in taxes. So assuming that savings assessment says, hey, Justin, you should be an S corp, the next step would be, am I incorporated? What is being incorporated meaning? LLC, PLLC, and professional corporation are the normal ones we'll see. And that is governed through your Secretary of State. So you get incorporated with the Secretary of State. From there, after you have your LLC, PLLC, or professional corporation approved, you can file a form with the IRS and say, hey, IRS, I'd like to be taxed as an S corporation. So the big concept here is there's your legal entity or incorporation type, and then there's your taxation type. So often folks get these confused of, oh, I'm incorporated as an S corp. It's actually impossible. You'd be incorporated as an LLC, PLLC, or professional corporation, and then taxed as an S corp. So again, if you're over that 100,000 profit or expect to be this year, definitely check out S corporations. This is something that's going to be on the rise and highly recommend everyone to try to figure out one of these avenues to focus on when it comes to non-therapy sourced income. You might have heard of a concept called passive income, or I like to call it, my dad calls it mailbox money. Every month you're getting a check, but you might not be actually doing anything for that check or income. So a great example of this is you've started a YouTube channel, right? Obviously, it takes a lot of time and effort to build the content and get an audience, but once you get that audience, and if it's getting viewed and engaged with, YouTube's sending you money every other week or every month. Let's say you have one video go viral, right? 6 months later, you're on vacation, sitting on a beach. You're still getting that check, right, from the viewer and engagement. So obviously that's a best case scenario, but there's a lot of other options here. You'll see the more traditional ones at the bottom that most people are doing, or I shouldn't say most, a high percentage of folks are doing with consulting and supervision. But I think we'll see those top ones of podcast, hosting retreat, writing content for websites, product sales, a little less much. But I think this is really a content-focused future. And you'll see 38% of folks have some sort of income outside of just doing one-on-one therapy, right? So whether it's an hour a week, an hour a month, encourage you to get creative. Think through, hey, if there's one of these that I think I could do really well at, which one of those would I explore? And then you start having diverse streams of income, right? Again, tying back of that 63% of folks losing a patient or client under 12 months. Here's a great way to stimulate that. You have another source of income coming in while you're potentially building back up that caseload. All right, so a lot of numbers on this slide. I'm not going to go through every one. I'm just going to talk through some high-level pieces. I think one is on the left side of the screen. You'll see individual therapy rate 159, and then average reimbursement rate from insurance 111. Right? Big difference there. And I know a lot of folks accept insurance, but the idea here is potentially diversifying. So maybe it's I accept some insurance and I'm adding more private pay folks to my mix. Why this concept is important is when it comes to goal setting. If you have not set an income or profit goal for this year, you're at a great time. The second half of the year starts in 4 days, next Tuesday. So maybe if you didn't set one, you have one for the last 6 months of the year. Now, when you have that goal of, let's say for easy math, $100,000 in income is your goal for the entire year, split into two, 50,000 the first 6 months, 50,000 the second 6 months. Now, if you know you have that as your income goal, let's assume you don't have any of those other income streams. So putting that aside, you would then need to divide $50,000 by your average session rate. Now, if you accept insurance, right, you're going to want to have two different calculations. So again, easy math. Let's say half of my clients are in take insurance and the other half are private pay. Right. So I would divide that 50,000. So I have 25,000 ideally coming from insurance, 25,000 coming from private pay. Divide the insurance rate by your average reimbursement rate and your private pay by your average private pay rate. That's going to show you how many sessions you would need. Right. Now, that's probably not as easy of math as that in that example I just said. But the piece I'm trying to get at is you don't just want to say, oh, I know I need to make 50,000 and I charge, I charge $100. So what's that divided by? You want to take into consideration how much of these folks are coming from insurance and how many are not to get back to that specific goal, right? Because then that way you're thinking through the different levels of income you're earning per hour. Sliding scale, another piece to think through. I wrote this down. I lost my note. 1 second. So I think it's a really interesting. Let's see if I can find it. Of how many folks last year accepted sliding scale. 77% of folks last year accepted sliding scale. So it's out there, right? And it's a great thing that people do. And so one, take that into consideration too, because if you treat every hour at the same dollar amount or dollar value, then you're not going to be able to work back properly to that goal. And for those who use insurance, just from a reassurance side, 63% of folks who use insurance use services like Headway, Grow, Alma. So a great way, especially when you're establishing your caseload, right, of usually getting clients quicker, credentialed quicker, et cetera. All right, just we move the next slide up. And Ms. Curie, we have our next poll. What was the biggest expense for therapists in 2024? So when you think about this question, right, you have your profit and loss with listed all of your expenses. What was the highest expense? Continuing education, office, payroll, EHR, rent, payroll, a lot of rents. So everyone who said rent or office, you are correct. It was the biggest expense in 2024, but similar to the last poll we did, right? It depends. If you don't have an office, you're not going to have rent. So maybe payroll is your top expense, especially if you're a group practice, or maybe CEUs. Sometimes it's the biggest one. So 36% said it was rent, right? You'll see a breakdown below. Again, this is in total dollar amount, not necessarily across all therapists. So again, take it with a grain of salt. I think the interesting one is if you probably have joined maybe one of our tax deduction webinars is you'll see travel 1%. And I always try to, and that hopefully maybe that came from some of our education, right? Of driving to and from your normal office is not considered a deduction, right? So you see only 1% have that as their top. But yeah, a lot of different varies on what type of therapy you're doing, where you're practicing, and things along those lines. And Carrie just made a great reminder in the chat that I just want to vocalize as well. Got one question, which can mean two things. One, I'm either doing a really bad job or maybe I'm doing a good job. But please ask us questions, right? Something can be tied to the slide itself, another concept. We'll have the dedicated time at the end, but we're also here. Got Justin, who's an expert in accounting and taxes, to help kind of answer these throughout. So don't forget that Q&A button. So one of the great things about operating a therapy practice is the idea of having a really good profit margin. My family's in the restaurant business, and the average profit margin for a restaurant is 30%. The average for therapy practice is 70%. over double, right? And so you have the ability to operate a very profitable business. And again, I'm going to bring up that reminder that you're also a business owner. I had a therapist recently tell me a few weeks ago that it's really challenging for him specifically to remember to take off his therapist hat and put on his business owner hat. And I really like that, right? Because all day, every day, a lot of you are in session helping patients and clients out. And you get to the end of the day and there's some business stuff that might occur. And sometimes it's hard to put that business hat back on, whether it's raising fees, whether it's cutting expenses, whether it's, maybe reorganizing your group practice in terms of a head count. Business isn't always easy and you have to make some tough decisions, right? And so just think about that again. At the end of every month, you want to put that business hat on when it comes to evaluating your expenses. So expenses, you can try to keep super, super slim. The highest I've seen is a 90% profit margin. Essentially just paying for something like Zoom and Simple Practice, and that's it, nothing else, right? Cutting it super, super slim. Now, is that realistic for everyone? No. And similar again, when you look at the average expense totals on the right, varies greatly in where you're at in your practice and what size practice you have. If you're a solo practice and having more than $50,000 in expenses, unless you're doing something abnormally usual, definitely want to try to cut that down, right? And as you get up in those triple digits, definitely going to be a group practice, right? Because payroll expenses, as some folks mentioned in the chat, which is definitely true for a lot of businesses, is the number one expense. So something to do at the end of each month, right? And I'll talk a little bit more about bookkeeping in a little bit. Review your expenses, just like hopefully you do for your personal finances. What subscriptions am I not using anymore? Oh, shoot, I signed up for that free trial and I never canceled it. But you want to keep an eye on these expenses. Every expense you cut or you're able to consolidate is money back into your pocket. I think that's one of the best things about being a business owner. Okay, accounting services. So Justin, I deal with this all day, every day, right? And so the first thing we want to say is it, again, depends on your practice, right? And so the second thing that I like to call out is how to evaluate an accountant or how much you should be paying, right? So let's say you're brand new. You don't have any income coming in yet. Try to be frugal. Think through it. You could likely start doing your bookkeeping on a spreadsheet. And I'll get more into bookkeeping in a second, right? And then from there, you get to your first quarterly tax estimate. And you kind of roughly figure out your own estimate. But then maybe 3 or 4 months in, you're like, you know what? I got some cash flow. I have some money in the bank. I'm feeling more confident. I'm feeling more comfortable. I'm starting to fill this caseload. Maybe that's the time you want to start thinking through hiring an accountant, right? And so that way that accountant or CPA can help with that next quarterly tax estimate. And we'll touch on quarterly taxes here in a little bit as well. And at the end of the year, you have your annual taxes, right? Great, I already have my CPA. They help me with my QTEs, your quarterly taxes. Now I'm going to use them for my annual taxes. But maybe you're someone who is super part-time and doesn't plan on ever going to full-time. You could continue doing that spreadsheet, kind of the hacky way to maybe calculate your estimates each quarter, and then use TurboTax at the end of the year. Now, if you're a full-time provider, highly, highly recommend working with the CPA or accountant, right? Maybe you could do the bookkeeping on your own through a spreadsheet or pay for something like QuickBooks, right? But then at the end of the year, why I recommend it is ideally they're going to save you money when it comes to taxes on tax deductions. And so especially here at Herd, right? Only working with those in mental health and wellness, truly knowing those best deductions. So on the slide, it's like on average, we ideally can save folks $5,000 in their first year in taxes. Which brings me to this idea that I believe accounting tax services is an investment. View it as an investment and less than an expense. If you're running that full-time practice, making over $100,000 and spending less than $1,000 on taxes or doing it yourself, potentially what are you missing out on, right? If you were able to save $5,000 in taxes by then working with a CPA that say charges $2,000 or easy math, even though you spent $2,000, you had a return on your investment for an additional $3,000. You saved 5,000 at the end of the year. So you take that 5,000 in savings, subtract that by the 2,000 you paid your accountant, you're up $3,000 for the year, right? That's why I say I always view it as an investment, assuming you're working with a good accounting or tax CPA. On the bottom, there's that 3% spending more than 5,000. And so little piece of advice around here is there are going to be scammy CPAs out there, especially who like to prey and take advantage on newer business owners. They might seem all nice and providing all these services, but if you're a solo provider paying over $5,000 in taxes and have a generic business and not some extremely complex personal situation, please reevaluate your tax and accounting situation because you're likely getting overcharged in that situation. Now, if you're running a big group practice or even a small group practice or have a really complex personal tax situation, hey, could be. And that brings me to, bear with me as well, it's a poor analogy, but I think it helps explain of if I'm going to go buy a streaming service, right? I'm looking at Hulu versus Netflix versus Disney Plus. I go online, I know exactly what shows and channels I'm getting, and I know it's this monthly price, how to cancel, etc. Much easier to make a decision than when it comes to accounting and taxes. When you're looking for a CPA, it's often like looking into a black box. There's not clear pricing on the website. It's not clear what services they're going to provide. So you usually meet with them and say, hey, here's my situation. How much does it charge? You might hear as low as, oh, we can do everything for $500. But the important piece is not just thinking about the dollar amount, it's what is being included, right? What is those services providing? $500 is likely you give them all your tax information in January, they give you a return and say, don't talk to me until next year, right? For some, hey, that's what they're looking for. They understand everything. They want minimal interaction. All they care about is annual taxes. But usually folks are like, I need help with annual taxes plus quarterly taxes, right? Plus bookkeeping, plus ongoing support, plus maybe an S Corp analysis. And so have a list of needs that you want or desires when going into these accountants or local CPAs and interview 3, 4, 5 of them. You're probably going to see a cost difference and then a service difference. And then the last piece is ask them for a genuine, transparent answer on how do you provide support. That $500 CPA probably is not answering your phone call once, right? But if you're paying, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, you would hope that you're getting this ongoing support, whether it's calls, emails, etc. And so, again, when you're evaluating that CPA, or accountants, a lot to think about, a lot of different solutions work. Usually the bigger the business, the more money you're wanting to spend as it's an investment. And if you're super part-time versus full-time, right, you're probably going to outsource different elements there. All right, we're on the next slide here of where folks spent money on marketing. So as I said, I touched on this earlier. We had the free version, right, of being the number one referral source. But you'll see 72% spent less than $1,000. And so one thing to keep in mind is the predatory marketing scams or schemes out there for new providers. I know when I used to be early on at Herd and was doing a lot of the bookkeeping for our clients, there'd occasionally be this like really random description and like $2,000 or $3,000 going. Say, hey, client, like try to figure out how to categorize this. What was this for? And like, oh, like I joined this marketing course boot camp, and this person said they're going to get my caseload up to full in a matter of a week. Now, I'm sure there's legit and great ones out there, but again, almost everyone that I interacted with in those situations, and I saw how much money they're spending, sometimes up to $10,000. And it's like, what is your return on investment going to get? Is there other options or opportunities? So if you are going to be doing one of those really expensive marketing courses, definitely recommend chatting with other therapists or getting some reviews or referrals. Just because, like I said, I've seen multiple people get taken advantage of, and they were not cheap. They were very expensive and saw very limited results from it. All right, more to bookkeeping and taxes here. And so now I'll briefly touch on what bookkeeping is itself, right? Step one is having a dedicated bank account for your business, or if you're incorporated, having a business bank account. you don't already, highly recommend setting one up because it keeps your finances from business and personal separate. So how most bookkeeping softwares work is you connect your bank account to the bookkeeping software, and it automatically pulls in the three inputs that are needed for bookkeeping, which are date, description, and dollar amount. That's why I was also saying, like, hey, you could use a spreadsheet if you're doing it, starting yourself or do it yourself, DIY, right? As you can see, almost 50% do it themselves, DIY. Same thing, column A, right? Date, description, dollar amount. And then you're adding the categorization. And so the categorization piece is the crux of bookkeeping. Why it's important is so that at the end of the month, you know what your profit is. Your profit is going to drive key business decisions of how much do I pay myself? How much should I set aside for taxes? How much should I maybe put away for retirement, right? And then when it also understands how your business is performing, right? And remember, like I said earlier, of reviewing your expenses at the end of each month. If you're just looking at 50 transactions, it's not going to be as pointed of a review. If you're reviewing the reports that come out from doing bookkeeping, then you're able to see by category what your expenses are, meaning how much you spend on office expenses versus marketing versus payroll versus furniture versus CEUs. And then as the business owner, right, having this business hat on at the end of the month, you start to get a gauge each month, like how much you are spending, right? And so then you know, wow, wait, how did my marketing go up 3x compared to last month? Oh, I forgot to cancel a subscription, or oh, I got double charged, right? It's like you want to be in the know of that every dollar you find is going back in your pocket, right? As the business owner. And so bookkeeping powers that. It's the foundation for your business. And so for those doing it yourself, right, a lot of folks have figured out their own way to do it, whether it's QuickBooks or, like I said, that spreadsheet method. But if you're someone who's doing it yourself and you're not keeping it up on a monthly basis, evaluate why. Is that because I don't have enough time? Is that because I can't figure out or don't want to do it? But if you're waiting until the end of the year in December, you're doing yourself a disfavor from your business because you don't understand how it's performing and you can't make those actionable decisions throughout the year. So that is what bookkeeping is, right? Think about it's the foundation to the reporting and understanding the tax, accounting, and finances around it. And if you're not doing it at all, either start doing it yourself or look at some of the solutions out there. And then if you're doing it yourself, right, great work. Make sure you're doing it each month though. And if not, try to figure out personally why that is occurring. Last piece I'll mention is if you are an S corporation or moving into an S corporation, highly recommend having a professional bookkeeper. Why that is as an S corp, there's new stringencies, rulings, and guidance, and just is a little bit more complex. So unless you're already really familiar with that, that'd be a great one to think about in terms of working with a professional bookkeeper. Justin, I'm going to pause real quick here. Any good questions come up from these last few slides? Anything we should touch on for the broader group, or able to get them through them all?
I was able to answer a few here in chat, but there was one that I'd like to point out as a common question and worth touching base on for the general crowd here. That question was, what do benefits mean in this sense? And that's a good question because coming from maybe working as a W-2, just an employee, opening up your practice, you don't have that type of experience, how to manage that from your end. And what that basically means is, in a general sense, benefits that you would offer your employees. And as Forrest had mentioned before, as corporations, they have a specific requirement that the owner of the business is actually a W-2 employee. So that would be actually offering benefits to yourself, even in some cases. So it gets a little bit tricky in those different scenarios, but essentially some of those might be health insurance, your 401k or retirement plans, additionally, any kind of reimbursements for therapy, for example, those sort of things could be good options for benefits that you would offer.
Awesome. Well, thanks for calling that out. It's benefits. I know can mean 100 different things, so it's helpful to hear it from your lens. All right, cool. Well, we can continue moving on here. I just needed a quick break for my voice and some water there. there. So thanks for stepping in for a second, Justin. We'll go to that next slide here. Okay, so a little bit more on bookkeeping, and this is where I like to introduce a concept of called time, money, and value. I think earlier when you're looking at those numbers slide, $149 was the average hourly session rate. So that means for the average person, the average value of 1 hour of your time is $150. So if you are spending more than 1 hour on bookkeeping, you might want to think in your head of, can I pay someone under $150 to do my bookkeeping? Here at Herd, I'll talk about a little later, we just rolled out a new product or package that's $50 a month, and we do all of your bookkeeping. So the time value of money, right? Bring this into a real life example. I can go see an extra client or patient for an additional hour, make $150, pay Herd $50 to do my bookkeeping, $100 coming back in my pocket. Think about that for a second. So whatever your hourly session rate is, your time is valuable, right? You have a unique specialty or expertise. And say it's even $200 or $300, sometimes I'll see an hour. That is the value of your time. And so if you're spending multiple hours on bookkeeping at that 150, that means, okay, 2 hours a month, that's worth $300 of my time, right? So I can either pay a bookkeeper or pay a bookkeeper and go see 2 extra patients or clients, or spend that 2 hours finicking around with bookkeeping, accounting, and taxes. So when you think about your business day to day and making decisions where you're spending your time, think about that average session rate, right? And that's quote unquote your average value. And it's weird putting a dollar amount next to your time when you're your own business owner. But again, time is valuable, especially when you're a therapist, and that's one of your predominant sources of income is seeing people in those one-on-one sessions. All right, I think this is the last poll, and this is a fun one. You can be honest. Maybe you're on one side or the other of having paid or not paid, but hopefully this will help reassure a lot of folks out there. So what percent of therapists paid quarterly taxes in 2024? Again, the answers all over the board, a lot of 50%, 90%. Oh, the accountant in me would love that. Okay, cool. Got a nice wide array of answers. And this one, as it usually goes, you see all different things. So only 48% paid quarterly tax estimates in 2024. So then the biggest thing to know here is you're not alone if you're someone who didn't pay, right? The majority of folks didn't pay them. Similar to S Corps, quarterly taxes is usually a whole nother webinar topic in its own, but high level, I'll talk to it for a minute here. So quarterly taxes is for those who are self-employed, 1. 2, most folks will pay quarterly taxes or need to pay them. There's a lot of myths and rumors online. I'm sure Justin can relate, helping out a lot of newer therapists paying quarterly taxes for the first time. They're scary, unique, unusual, but most of the time you're gonna have to pay them. Why that is all the money you make as a self-employed professional is pre-tax. So you get that first deposit in your account from Stripe or a check or Headway or Row, whatever it may be. And that is pre-tax. Unlike when you're a W-2 employee, like Carrie, myself, and Justin, when we get our money in our bank account as W-2s, that's post-tax, meaning taxes are already withheld. And so how it works as a self-employed individual is the IRS says, hey, Justin, Q1 just ended. How much do you owe us? And then the state of California says, hey, Justin, you also owe your state estimates. How much do you owe us? Right? And so each quarter, you're responsible, assuming you trigger that estimate criteria, to pay the IRS and then your state if your state collects income taxes. And so how you calculate it is, not extremely complex, but I would call it complex, which is why a lot of folks will work with an accountant or CPA to figure it out. But keep in mind, there's state, there's federal, 4 times a year. And if you miss that deadline and you are triggering that estimates, fines and penalties will start accruing. Similar like credit card debt, it will start snowballing and accumulating, right? And I'm telling you this, right, of not from a scare factor, but because time and time again, I'll meet with people in the April timeframe. They come out with a $30,000 tax bill. Why? They didn't know that the money they were making was pre-tax. It was their first year in business, but they didn't pay any quarterly taxes that year. So the whole year they went away without paying any taxes. They didn't know that though, right? Because they're used to being a W-2. And so not only are you making up for a year's worth of taxes, you are also getting fined and penalized. And so the great news is we're only halfway through the year. Meaning, if you haven't made any estimates this yet, one, start setting aside money. About 30% of profit is a good benchmark indicator. And then think about Q3's deadline. That's September 15th. September 16th, the system closes and your payment's late. All right. So it's very important to be timely. Last payment of the year, I think it's January 15th, unless that falls on a Sunday. That's the last time you can make estimates for the year 2025. And so always folks will usually ask their CPA or accountant, hey, now that you can kind of have a good idea about my books being closed, you know my profit for the year, how am I doing on estimates? Do I need to pay a little more in, maybe a little less? And if you overpay your estimates, at the end of the year, when you file your taxes, you'll get that money back via credit. So more of the story, less than half the people surveyed paid quarterly taxes, but realistically, they quote unquote paid for it from financially, right? And had to pay extra. And so they're new, they're confusing. We have a lot of great content on our website. Something we do for all of our members is calculate it for those state and federal ones each quarter, but something to keep in mind. How are you filing taxes, right? You'll see that chart there. I'm not going to run through that because it's very similar to determining choosing a bookkeeper. Can I do it myself? Should I use TurboTax? Use that same kind of method to the madness there. And then last thing on the right, how are you taxed? So you heard me talk about S Corps earlier, right? Only 20% of the folks surveyed did that, which makes sense because not everyone is making over $100,000 in profit, which is normally when an S Corp makes sense. Now, for those who are not sure how your practice is taxed, I'm going to give you a few pieces of advice if that's maybe you today, right? One, look at your tax return last year. Did you file what's called a Schedule C, which is including your personal tax return? That would mean you are taxed as a sole proprietor. As you can see, the vast majority of folks, 70% surveyed. Right? Now, if you didn't file taxes last year and you weren't sure, the question is, hey, have you been incorporated and filed the tax as an S Corp this year? If no, then your tax is a sole proprietor. Sole proprietor is the default tax status. So if I open a practice tomorrow, I'm considered a sole proprietor. But if I form an LLC or PLLC, still taxed as a sole proprietor. The normal occurrence that we see when folks are not taxed as a sole proprietor is when they elect to the S Corp to be taxed as an S, or elect to the IRS to be taxed as an S corporation. And just in an essence of time here, I'm going to skip through or breeze through this feature section. So Justin, if you want to, yeah. So paying off debt. Oh, sorry. If you go back real quick. Paying off debt was the number one priority for therapists. One thing to know is that I think it was 27% of folks had more than $30,000 in student debt. So we know it's real. It's a big amount. A lot of money is owed. It is not a business deduction, unfortunately, but it goes to your personal taxes and can be a deduction. And we'll be sharing all these slides too, so you can always dive into it later. And then if you're someone, right, who's been affected by a lot of the changes that are going along in the political economic environment, you're also not alone, right? And so we like to share this from a reassurance side. And it's tough with all the uncertainties and unknowns. But yeah, this is right from our survey, right? All right, Justin, we'll go to the next slide. Cool. So last little piece about her, because I want to spend a minute, especially for those who have joined a Spruce webinar in the past. We have a brand new plan that is likely going to be a great fit if you need bookkeeping help. So it's called our starter plan, and it's $50 a month. For reference, QuickBooks is $40 a month. You have to do your own bookkeeping, or you pay $300 a month to have someone do your bookkeeping. So with her, $50 a month, we're doing all of your bookkeeping, right? Having the experts do it on your behalf. You get your monthly reports, understand that P&L, how your business is performing, and then unlimited support when it comes to the domains outside of annual and quarterly taxes. So great thing to check out. We'll share that consult link and QR code here once more in a second. But you see that little graphic that explains what I was trying to explain with my hands earlier of the date, description, and dollar amount, and then that categorization at the end. And then this allocation guide is also included, which I think is so helpful for new providers, even experienced providers. You remember we talking earlier, right? You get your profit at the end of the month. That drives how you should be thinking about your money. So at the end of each month, Herd will give you this report. It says, okay, you made $2,800 in profit. Here's how much to set aside for taxes, $867. That's going to help save each month for your quarterly taxes. Paying yourself, owner's draw. I know this is a struggle for newer experienced providers. I have no idea how much to calculate to pay myself. I'm scared to take money out, right? And so these numbers give you the reassurance and confidence that you're managing your money properly. And then if you are someone who's looking for annual tax and quarterly tax support, we also have our normal plan that we've always had at $169 a month. So full service QTEs, annual tax, everything plus that starter plan. But the nice thing is for those new therapists, right, who maybe cash is a little tight or you just started June 1st, you can always start on that quote unquote starter plan at $50 a month. When the time is right, you have more money, you can upgrade in because that way you have until December, right? And you maybe want to start thinking about annual taxes. Awesome. And so once more, here's that QR code. And Carrie, if you don't mind sharing that URL in the chat, beautiful. Thank you. Oh, I think you might have just sent the Slack URL I sent you. If you don't, I don't know if anyone's going to access that one. Oh, fun is right. These are live, as you can see, right? It is fun. So anyways, free consults, they're 30 minutes long. They're with our new business team. They're not intended to sell you or push you over the one way or the other. They're great individuals. They meet with about 5 to 10 therapists today, so super knowledgeable about your business. And their goal is to learn more about you, your business, your practice goals, and then determine if Herd's a good fit, and then maybe point you in the direction. Hey, Justin, I think you're a really great fit for the startup plan, right? Or hey, I think, based off where your business is at or going into, you might be a great fit for an S corporation. So let's at Herd, we do those free S corp assessments, figure out if that's next. Similar to our Q&A today, right? In those consults, I always like to call out, they can't provide like specific personalized tax advice. So if you go in there saying, I need to know what my Q3 estimate is, what do I need to pay? I get it, right? But it's like they would be doing you a disservice by giving you that number. But our team for members can always answer stuff like that. So awesome. Well, with that being said, we got 5 minutes left. Sorry, I did a little soapbox in a few of those slides. When sometimes these topics come up, it's hard to stay on track. But definitely can answer any Q&A. Carrie, I saw you come off mute for a second. Was there anything you wanted to chime in and say?
No, I was just going to rejoin, but I'm going to let y'all get through any remaining Q&A before I thank you profusely. You take minutes.
Okay, cool. Justin, any other good questions come up or topics, themes we should address or anything open that you saved for the end here?
Yeah, I've got one here that's kind of a general question for us regarding our insurance rate. And I think you might be more in tune with this, just to be honest on it. So the question is, I've been struggling with getting an insurance rate increases over time. And is this something that Herd can assist with?
Yeah. Insurance is a weird, tough, difficult space. I know here at Herd, our insurance costs for our employees went up 30%. And the guy from Cigna or a broker or whatever was presenting, and someone asked, why did they go up 30%? Right? because insurance, healthcare is privatized industry, and they do kind of what they want. And so I'm just going to be brutally honest with you. If you are a solo provider, you do kind of, unfortunately, what the insurance rates give you. You get that big contract after you get paneled or credentialed and paneled with an insurance agency. And there's really no wiggle room. There's no say. It's like David versus Goliath in a way. Like if you're like, no, I need a raise or I want a higher rate, they're going to say, you know what, then go find another insurance agency to work with. So that's the brutal honesty, right? And I'm sure a lot of folks can relate to how messed up our healthcare or insurance system is. Now, if you're having a tough time getting paneled or credentialed, which I've heard recently too is a challenge, they're not larger insurance companies aren't accepting as many solo providers because they're just working with groups or larger companies because it's easier for them. And so that's where like a Headway, Grow, Alma, some of those options can be helpful because they have a potentially a larger play and can get you, what's it called, like a fast track to credential, and then sometimes have higher negotiated rates. But yeah, it's tough. We just started doing insurance billing a little bit here at Herd, and I've gotten closer to it. And just every time I chat with someone or every time I learn more, it just kind of makes you want to throw up. You see how messed up the system or how underpaid or how difficult they make it on providers, even after you're credentialed and all the paperwork. Okay, I got to stop because I'm going to go on soapbox around insurance. Any other good ones,
Yeah,
Justin?
so we've got another one. How does bookkeeping at Herd compare to Herdler? And I'll speak on that one for a minute there.
Oh, good.
So after going through this webinar a little bit, you should have a good understanding of the services that we offer. But we can't speak specifically to comparisons of Herdler and competition there. But generally speaking, we're a one-stop shop. We also have a dedicated support team that can help answer questions specific to your unique landscaping there. But if you have any specific other questions, you can feel free to ask.
And I'm looking at Hurdler right now because I hadn't heard him either. It looks very similar from an interface platform, like similar level of services and features. I think the biggest differentiator from Herd's end is we only work with mental health and wellness. So truly are the experts, right? In the space. We know the best tax deductions. We know how your business operates. So that's oftentimes what folks wind up choosing to Herd sometimes over other services. All right. Well, I know we have a minute left. So Carrie, I don't know if you want to do any closeout or anything from your end, but there will be a survey. Hopefully that comes out, which we'd love folks to fill out, and let Carrie know if you have any topics. But yeah, Carrie, take it away to close it.
Yeah, just a big thank you to you, Forrest and Justin, for joining today and going through these really interesting results. I honestly look forward to this survey every year. I think it's incredible, and you get such great traction with respect to your respondents. So glad that you could share it with our audience today, and hopefully everyone got as much out of it as I did. We will welcome you back next year with your next set of survey results. In the meantime, I hope that everyone joins us for our webinar next month. And you will be getting an email a little bit later today with a link to the recording. I can also share the slides, assuming that Forrest and Justin, you guys are okay with that. And any questions, you will have Forrest's information, so you can reach out. And with that, I will close this out and just say thanks. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and we will catch up on the next time.
Right on time. Thanks, Carrie, again, and have a great weekend, everyone. Bye now.
Bye-bye.